the pointy end. I'm Keith Sutherland. Today my guest is Senator Richard DiNatale, Greens Leader. So welcome to Bendigo.
G'day.
Now you've had a pretty busy time. You've only been elected less than 12 months ago, and then you've come up to some pretty voting reforms with the Senate. Perhaps if we can talk about that for a start, because I'm a bit of a social media junkie, and there was a lot of criticism about the Greens policy, and the thing that I sort of find a little strange is that basically there is a chance with the new voting reforms that you could possibly lose South Australia, Western Australia. I know that you'll say you won't, but at the end of the day, it was pretty radical to go with that. I know that the criticism was that why did you go with the Libs on this? It's been a policy of the Greens for 10, 12 years, I understand, but it was pretty radical, I would have thought.
So the first thing to say is, you're right, it was a long-held Greens policy, and the reason we've had the policy for more than a decade is because we believe in democracy and we think this is a very democratic reform. You see, under the current system, you can vote for a party that's got one set of policies and you can elect someone who's got the opposite set of policies. I mean, that's not how a democracy should work. I mean, under the current system, someone can get 0.5% of the vote, someone can get 25% of the vote, and they both return one senator. So again, the system's broken. What this does is it says all these backroom preference deals that go on under the current system, we're getting rid of those. We're allowing voters to make their own decisions about preferences. And ultimately, in a democracy, giving more power to voters is what we should be doing. So that was a primary driver for us. In terms of what it means, look, if people vote for us, we'll get more people elected. If people don't vote for us, we'll lose people. But ultimately, again, that's the test of a true democracy. And I don't buy this nonsense about it's going to give control to one party or the other. The truth is that predicting the outcome of the Senate is almost impossible. If the Greens end up with balance of power in the Senate, it's because people wanted us there and they voted for us in that position. If we're not in that position, well, it's because they haven't voted for us.
South Australia is a problem to you with Nick Xenophon, I should say. He'll probably get maybe 2, possibly 3, and you may not get the second senator up there.
Under a double dissolution, that's true. He might get 2 or 3. We hope to return 2 people. I mean, look, even in a half Senate election under the old rules, South Australia was still vulnerable. So South Australia is, because of the Nick Xenophon factor, he's always tough for us, but we've got 2 great candidates there. I think that you will see both Sarah Hanson-Young and Robert Sims returned. I think they're excellent. They've done an excellent job, Robert in a short time, Sarah over a number of years. Her advocacy on refugees is something that people right across the nation are thankful for. So look, I'm hopeful, but again, a lot will depend on how well we do more generally. If our vote goes up, then we'll return those people. And if it doesn't, then they're vulnerable. And that's a democracy. That's what should happen in a democracy. The way it stands is a total lottery. You can have someone elected on 0.5%. You can have someone like I did in 2007 miss out on 10%. That's not a democracy.
No. You mentioned the double dissolution and the trigger. It seems to me that the Turnbull government is running a high risk stake here, because with the double dissolution, they're going on the ABCC bill. It's a win-win for Malcolm Turnbull anyway, because if you pass the legislation, he wins. If you don't pass it, then he goes to that double dissolution. But surely it's a high stakes rule, because at the end of the day, they've got the Free Enterprise Foundation, which is hovering around, talking about, okay, unions on one side, but we're not talking about big business. Everyone wants an ICAC. So how do we equate to that sort of legislation?
Well, the first thing to say is the government could go to a double dissolution independently of the ABCC legislation. They've already got a trigger with registered organisations. The question is that around the Building Commission, it may be that the bill isn't voted on for a second time. And if it's not voted on for a second time, then what ends up happening there is they can potentially take that as a trigger, but the High Court might strike it down. So that's something that will be tested in the court. You are absolutely right, though. At the heart of the notion of this, what is effectively an anti-union piece of legislation, the Building Commission, is this notion that there's corruption in the building industry, but there's no corruption anywhere else.
That's the problem.
What we need is a national anti-corruption watchdog. I think you'll find that many of the crossbenchers want it. Greens certainly want that. Sadly, when we put legislation, because the Greens have been campaigning on that issue for a number of years, when we put legislation to the Parliament a few years ago on the establishment of a national anti-corruption watchdog, both the government and the Labor Party voted it down.
And therein lies the problem, because we're going, and the trouble is that when the lower house go back, or you all go back on the 18th of April, and then you have the budget 1 week earlier, of course, there's a lot of stuff going on. But what are the lower house going to talk about? Because really there's no issues going on, and Malcolm Turnbull's made this the centrepiece.
Yes, I think you'll find that even though Malcolm Turnbull wants the parliament to resume for 3 weeks, I suspect it won't happen. I think you'll find that in the Senate, look, it'll be resolved one way or another, but I don't think it'll be within 3 weeks. I think you'll find that there's a resolution much more quickly than that. And I think you'll find that the lower house won't be sitting for the full 3 weeks.
Okay, we'll move on with a lot of the Greens policies, and you're renowned for climate change, of course, and that seems to be dropped off the agenda, even though we've talked about Paris and all the other things that have happened. Refugee policy, you mentioned Sarah Hanson-Young has been to the forefront of all that all the way through. I'm passionate about the NBN. We had Jason Clare on the program, Shadow Minister. The other thing has been very big from the Greens is the transport policy, and I noticed that last week the Daniel Andrews mentioned, and they talk about infrastructure, the money. In Victoria, we get $91 per person for infrastructure projects, particularly for rail, and Victorian wanted for rail. Queensland gets $362. You're a Victorian senator. You're going to be supporting Daniel Andrews' push to try and get more money for public transport?
Yes, we are. We think that that's a no-brainer, that having a greater investment in public transport infrastructure is a no-brainer. Of course, the great tragedy under Tony Abbott was what we saw was all money from the federal government going towards roads at the expense of public transport, despite the fact that we had a whole lot of cost-benefit analysis showing us that many of these public transport projects were going to provide a much bigger return. You mentioned climate change. It may have slipped off the national debate. We won't let that happen. We are going to make sure that the issue of global warming is front and centre at this election. If we don't deal with this problem, we are at the moment in the middle of a climate emergency. Everything else that we talk about, it's redundant, because if we don't start turning around our emissions profile in this country and globally, the planet as we know it will cease to exist. And that's the science telling us that. We're on a trajectory for a close to 3 degree increase in temperatures. That will be a planet that is transformed, more extreme weather, bushfires, drought. We're talking about refugee issues at the moment, climate refugees in the millions, health. See the transmission of bloodborne viruses. We'll see the transmission of so many other vector-borne diseases. It is going to be a catastrophe, so we have to manage the issue of climate change. Big opportunities though, huge transformation of the economy, jobs in renewables. I've just been to the Mount Mercer wind farm, for example. We could have Bendigo and this region.
Castlemaine's pretty big on it too.
Well, Castlemaine is, but a lot of the investment there is at a community level. Why not get large-scale commercial investment in the region? Wind, solar farms, photovoltaic as well as solar thermal. They are all huge jobs drivers. They bring international investment. We've got to start looking at the issue, and I was in Paris for the Paris negotiations. Business right around the world is taking this issue on, and Australia risks being left behind. You mentioned refugees and asylum seekers. We can't continue down the path we're on. It's never okay to harm kids and their families in an effort to send a message to someone else. It's just a line as a civilised society we can't cross.
I totally agree with
There's
that.
got to be another way. There has to be another way. And finally, you mentioned the NBN. We agree that there has to be, the government has to ditch this nonsense.
We're talking
which
fibre
they have
to
at
the
the
node
moment.
nonsense. It is, it's crazy.
We know that it's a temporary band-aid. It's going to cost us a hell of a lot more to fix the mess. Labor's policy was a good one. And what we should do is go back to what was originally planned, fibre to the home. People don't really get that what we're talking about here is a piece of infrastructure that is going to drive jobs and productivity. That's what this stuff is, right? Telecommunications is going to be the tool through which we can grow jobs and we can grow our economy. And we've got a Prime Minister who says he wants innovation, committing to this second-rate broadband network.
And we have a poor relation in Bendigo because we were on the thing to be getting fibre to the premises. We now get fibre to the node, and they're starting to roll it out at the moment. And Ballarat, Shepparton have got fibre to the premises. So we're already missing business already. Just want to pick up a point you made about the climate change. I know I'm jumping back, but with that, now last time around the Greens didn't support Labor. The ETS that Labor are proposing at this point in time, are you talking with Labor on coming up with a reasonable explanation? Because it seems like Liberal National Party are not interested too much.
That's right.
But are you talking to Labor on their ETS that they're proposing?
Well, just a couple of things about the last ETS. The last ETS, if we'd locked it in, we'd have a carbon price of less than $1 compared to the $23 that we introduced when we were in.
Yeah, it wasn't being
with
super
Labor.
critical.
I think there's a sort of sense from some people that somehow if that scheme was adopted, things would be okay now. It's not. The scheme that would have been locked in until 2020 would have done very, very little, and we'd be having a debate about what we need to do next, which is where we are now. I think that what we did when we were supporting the Labor Party in government, that scheme was one of the most ambitious and effective schemes anywhere in the world, and we're the first country to actually go backwards under Tony Abbott. We aren't talking to Labor about it at the moment because Labor haven't got a proposal on the table that they want to discuss with us. My approach is pretty straightforward on this stuff. If the Labor Party are fair income and want to introduce an emissions trading scheme that's going to work, then of course we'd welcome any discussion with them on it.
Okay, just a couple of quick things. You've been very prominent this week, late line and lots of discussion. The first one you said to me, even though it's dead in the water now, the new state tax was a terrible idea, dog's breakfast. It's gone already. The other one that you've been very strong on, this is something I want to just pick up on, it's been a bit of a sleeper, I would have thought, but it really hits a nerve pocket, was the private health insurance. And you said it's going to be a $6 billion bill, and the Parliamentary Budget Office is suggesting there'll be savings of $50 billion over a period of time. Now, that's something that is really starting to generate in the community. We're sick of paying out these increases to private health companies all the time, when you said that money should go back to hospitals.
Yeah, so what happens, the rebate is a really ineffective way of spending money on health. It's very inflationary. Part of the reason that premiums are going up is because insurance companies know that the government's going to foot the cost for 1/3 of the increase in the premium. So it's inflationary. It's one of the reasons that premiums are going up. It's very unfair. You've got half of the population who are subsidising the healthcare for another half of the population. I had someone contact me and say, I don't think it's fair that we get rid of the rebate because the rebates help my child get braces because of private health insurance. Now, how is it fair that someone living in Bendigo, potentially someone who might not have a job, or at least somebody who's contributed to paying taxes in some way through their life, but doesn't have private health insurance, should be subsidising someone else's child getting braces or indeed getting some other form of treatment? It's a very unfair system. Our view is this, and the other thing, of course, is the whole thing was set up to try and take the pressure off the public hospital system. It hasn't done it. People are spending a lot on their private health insurance. Many of them continue to use the public health system when they need to have surgery or some sort of other intervention. So our position, which is a position backed up by almost every health economist, by the former head of the health department, is let's take that money and let's invest it directly in the public health system, directly into the hospitals, and you'll get much bigger bang for your buck. So what we're saying is it's unfair, it's inflationary, it's very inefficient. Redirect that money directly into the public health system. You'll find that people who are taking out private health insurance, many of them, because they don't have faith in the public system, will now be able to rely on the public system to provide the services that they need.
Okay. Finally, you're in Bendigo, obviously, to support the Greens candidate, Rosemary Glaser. She's doing a great job out in the community, getting around. She's been on our program here talking about local issues, Greens issues. So obviously that's what you're in town for today, and getting to know Bendigo people. So we'd like to have you here more often, of course.
Love to come back. And we have got a great candidate here in Bendigo. Rosemary Glaser is a terrific candidate. She's got a very strong connection to the area, a very strong commitment to issues like education. But we're just talking to Rosemary earlier, and she was just telling me how critical she thinks the issue of global warming is and the big opportunities that it presents for people in Bendigo in terms of jobs and investment. So I hope to come back and do a bit more campaigning with her in the region in the lead up to the election campaign, and to talk about our positive and optimistic vision for the people of Bendigo.
Well, Richard, thank you so much for appearing on the Pointy End program today. It's great, and I'll take you up on that coming back to Bendigo, because we like to high-profile people coming to town, obviously supporting a candidate, but just giving us an overview of some issues, because, as I said, you've had lots of publicity this last week, which is a good thing from your point of view, and the Greens getting their message out, because it's a bit harder for you guys to get that message out.
It is hard, and thanks for the opportunity to have a chat with you today.